Welcome back to the Mustang Blueprint. I'm Alex, your host for today.
And I'm Elena, your co-host. I'm an alum of SMSU, and I'm so happy to be back.
So today we have a special guest. Um, his name is Sam, the student body president. And Sam, why don't you introduce yourself? Because you're a man of many talents. So rather than me introducing you, I'm sure it's easier for you to introduce yourself.
Thanks. Yeah. Like you said, I'm Sam. I am technically a super senior this year. It's my 5th year, majoring in political science and justice administration, and have a few minors as well in pre-law and public administration. So I really love SMSU, or it really loves me. I can't figure out which one yet. Yeah, I'm in student government. I'm in Enactus, which is a social entrepreneurship club. I'm a student ambassador for the admissions office. Oh, there's so many more I can't remember all off the top of my head, but and I'm the vice president of the Criminal Justice Club.
Wow, that's a lot of things. So tell us how you got involved in all those things. Like, that's a lot to just jump into. So
Yes.
Walk us through kind of how you got to where you are today with all those.
Of course, yeah. So I originally came to SMSU in 2020 as a freshman. So it was a COVID year. There wasn't a lot going on. But my admissions counselor, Gus, he reached out and put my name kind of in the hat kind of deal to be a student volunteer for the admissions office through the ambassador program. And that really kind of got me started, I guess, involved. And I got to do campus tours for new incoming students, doing things like that. And that actually kind of helped me switch my major, because I was originally pre-med. And then after a year and a half, I was like, I don't want to leave. I want to stay here. And didn't really want to do pre-med anymore, so then I switched to political science, and I was like, you know what, let's get involved. Let's do student government. So then I reached out to Professor David Starok, who I thought was kind of in charge of that because, political science, and then also our former Senate liaison, Doug Simon, to kind of figure out what to do and how to apply. And I got an application and then became a senator. And then after that year, I ran for vice president, and then started getting involved with Enactus as a project lead, and then just kind of kept growing up and became president of student association or student government, as well as the president of Enactus, and then added another project lead title, and then joined a bunch of other clubs because they matched my major, they seemed fun, and I just wanted to do a lot.
Because why not, of course.
Exactly.
So you brought up an interesting point that you initially came here thinking of doing pre-med, doing your generals, and then transferring. But however, you found your passion for criminal justice. So how would you say for students who are kind of figuring out what major they want to do, maybe they're already in a major, they're not happy, how would you tell them to navigate that?
Oh, for sure. I know that's always a tricky subject to kind of figure out what you want to do with your life. I always ask that question on tours to prospective students of whether or not, do you know what you're going to do? Do you have any ideas? And a lot of times they do have something, but they always say, I don't know. I'm like, that's okay if you don't know. First off, don't panic. I was someone that panicked. I did all those BuzzFeed quizzes, on what should I do with my life? What do I do? Because as a, 16 through almost 19-year-old in high school, trying to figure out what am I going to do for the next 4 years of studying, and then what the rest of my life is a huge topic. So when it comes to that, just kind of know what feels right. Kind of think of it as if you're going to do this as a job for the rest of your life, are you going to be happy with it? Are you going to be able to go home after every day and it's I can't wait to go to work tomorrow. I know there's going to be some of those bad days where you don't want to, but having the overall, this is a job I like, is kind of the guidance for it. If it's something that you find naturally that you love to do, I think that's another great guiding kind of principle in kind of figuring out your education. A lot of times it's not about the money. Sometimes that's a bonus of what you want to do, but just make sure you do something that makes you feel good and not dread going to work every day, I would say.
Yeah. So obviously going into all these things, it's not easy to just jump into all these things, or even as you do it gradually, it can't be easy. So are there some times where you were maybe nervous, or there was some fear? And what do you have for advice for students, especially kind of freshmen, but all students and everybody just coming out of their comfort zone, finding time or finding a way out of that fear? Any advice on how to kind of overcome your fear and stuff and just get involved more in that way?
Oh, for sure. One of the biggest things you'll see is sometimes you'll get thrown into things right into the deep end, and there's no easy gliding into it kind of deal. So just be careful of that. And when it does happen, just take a second to relax and breathe, A lot of times when you get overwhelmed, that's when it determines, if you're going to stick or not. And one thing I love to do, especially when I'm overwhelmed with things, is write down everything I need to do, whether it be for the day, for a club, for a class, and just kind of like, one step at a time kind of deal. Like you just take a deep breath, understand that some of the things that you have to do need to get done. And so they're going to get done eventually. It's like, that's the big kind of saving grace of like, if you have a big presentation you have to give for a club or something like that, or a big project you're working on, know that in the end it will get done because it has to. And that kind of, for me at least, takes off the pressure. Like, okay, I know no matter how much time I put into stressing, eventually it will get done and it will be good. And if it's not, that's okay. You'll learn from it. You'll take those marks, you'll apply it to the next time and make it better. So it's just something that you have to take one step at a time and just let the process happen.
As you mentioned correctly, like sometimes you'll feel you're being thrown to the deep end. You might not know how to swim, but still you're and a great example of still you made it out alive. You learned how to swim somehow. You survived. Yes. So do you have any story or any personal experience you could share of you being just thrown to the deep end and kind of figuring things out?
The biggest one that comes to mind, so when I became vice president with my friend Ashton, who was the current president at the time, a lot of the leadership of the student government was graduating and gone. Like they just left. And I felt like we didn't get a lot of training. Like we got the basics down and kind of like going over the constitution of what our roles entail, but like a piece of paper is not going to tell you what to do. So we felt very lost for a long time. And it was also kind of after COVID. It was still a thing. It was kind of dying down a little bit, but like it was still kind of having an effect on all the clubs. So our membership for Senators was down. And so not only being thrown into a position where you have to kind of manage this and kind of do a lot of things for the school and for the student body, but then also trying to make sure you maintain numbers, get the message out that we need help for students to be a voice, but then also just like surviving as an organization, because that was a tough time for a lot of clubs. And the way it's built is like the student government is kind of like the parent organization. A lot of clubs come through us to get recognized, to get approved. So it was a huge risk and huge like fear of mine, at least, like if this fails, what's going to happen next? Like, is it just going to be a organization that's kind of not seen as proper anymore, not seen as organized and professional? Like that was a huge fear that it would just kind of fall off the deep end and get dissolved, or I didn't know exactly what. I don't think it ever would, but it was just a scary moment. But we eventually got it. We got it together. We got a bunch of senators on board. We built our exec team, and this year and the following or year before, it just turned out very well. So
you talk a lot about being thrown into things and stuff, but obviously becoming student body president isn't something that you're just handed and thrown at. Mm-hmm. So what are some things that along your leadership journey that helped you to grow confidence in your leader, to help you prepare yourself for like your role as student body president, as an active president, as a mentor over other students, just in all different kinds of aspects around the school?
Definitely. One thing I would say is just the encouragement I got, not just from my friends, but also from the faculty and staff involved with student government or the ones we worked with, really gave a lot of praise to like the work we've done overall as a team. So it really kind of took away the fear that we weren't doing so good when I was vice president, and made me think, okay, this is something I can do. I got the strength to make it this far. I have the skills to at least lead a meeting. I might as well go above and beyond. And so just kind of having that strength to take the next step is huge. I kind of didn't want to do it, but I was like, you know what? It's either you do it or you don't and regret it later. And so I was like, you know what? The worst thing that happened is this is the 1 year I do it and I'm done. But that obviously isn't the case now since it's my second year in that. But it's just something that if you don't know exactly if you're fit for leadership, that's a good time to try, because if you're not, you're not, and you can always polish your skills and come back. That's the biggest thing. Is we always get taught like, failure is not the end, and that is very true, because you can fail at something multiple times, especially in college gives you that ability to fail and retry. So having that kind of as a comfort and as a guidance of like, this isn't the end. If I fail here, I can keep going. I can polish what I need to do and just be a good leader, hopefully. And feedback too is also huge. Kind of take in, there was always a way of doing things and there's a way to improve how things used to be done. So taking that into account too is huge.
So as you mentioned, you're involved in a lot of clubs, student government, enactors, criminal justice, and if I'm not mistaken, college Republicans.
Yes.
So
Forgot that.
if you don't mind, could you maybe speak a bit more about those clubs, what sort of projects you all do, maybe for prospective students who are interested? Speak
sure.
a bit more about your involvement, what that club is about, if you could just expand on that.
For sure, all of them, or just a certain one, or
I would say a little bit of everything, then
little bit
people
of
could
everything.
decide.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll just start from the top. So for student government, one thing I do as president is like I represent SMSU for Students United, which is kind of a great group that represents all the Min-State system schools. And I represent and work for roughly 50,000 students in the system itself as with other board members. And we make some big decisions. And we're actually doing a lobbying trip here in February 17th and 18th. So we get to go up to the state capitol and meet some of our legislative people around. So like Gary Dames, Chris Wadinsky, a few others, and talk about some certain things. So as part of our legislative agenda that we set is increasing the Pell Grant funding. That was one of our big things last year, and we're just kind of continuing it this year. So we do stuff like that for students because it's a student-focused organization. But as for here on campus, some of the big things I've been trying to work on is involvement for not just clubs, but for campus-wide committees. Something like the calendar committee or the space committee or student tech feed. These are all things that need student input, and they still function without students, but they don't get the proper student input if no student is on it. So last semester I hosted a committee fair, and this one we're planning for our second one, and hopefully it'll become an annual thing after I'm gone and graduated. So that's a huge thing, just to kind of show students what the campus offers and how it looks good on your resume, and kind of even hones in on your skills of just learning different things. Like you don't have to be someone really good with numbers to join Tech Fee. Like I'm not a numbers person. Math isn't my favorite, but it's really interesting going into those meetings and kind of debating on how are we going to spend this money properly? What resources for the students related to technology are we going to spend it on, and stuff like that. Also, another thing that's been kind of passed on to one of my committee chairs is the campus-wide for student-led town halls, so like giving students the option to kind of voice their concerns about major issues and bringing it to the faculty is a big one. For Enactus, which is, I'm not a business person at all, and I kind of found it really funny that I'm in it, but I love it. It's one of the favorite things I do. So as president, it's just kind of like leading the organization, working with our other leadership members, and Marcia, our advisor, who is great, kind of figuring out what to do next, how to support our projects, how to increase engagement. But with that, I am co-lead for one of my favorite projects. It's Rebuild to Reintegrate. It's a criminal justice website aimed at reducing the amount of people going back to prison after their release by being like a centralized hub of information. So that's something that I've been really working on with a great team, and it's been going very well. We just secured our domain. We have our website almost created, so we've been taking some big strides with that. So that's been where it's been with Enactus. For College Republicans, we've just been trying to get students to the Capitol. We're working on, with our president, Joseph Anderson, on trying to get to the Capitol to see again our legislative support staff and their senators and stuff like that, just to talk to them, to get their input about, what the current session is like or what they're expecting with things, and just seeing the Capitol itself.
I mean, if you're interested, you can speak about your potential wine and cheese club.
Oh, I guess, yeah. It's in the early stages, but I wanted to create a club called Wine and Cheese Club for whining and some cheese. Non-alcoholic beverages will be served. So I thought, it'd be a great place for students to be support students to each other. So just a nice place with some guidelines. Obviously, you don't want to kind of complain about people, and be respectful. You want to have that respect and kind of some guidelines on how to do it. But just a good place for students to vent and just be heard, because I know that's one thing I always tell people, especially my mom. Like when I call her, I'm like, I just wanted to have you listen to me. Eventually, I'll probably need a solution or two, but just let me talk right now. And that really helps me, and I know a lot of students feel the same way. So that's a work in progress kind of alternative source of stress relief that I'm planning.
If you need an alumni advisor, let me know. I'd love to have some good cheese every once in a while.
For sure.
But I was counting, and if I'm counting right, which I'm probably missing some, you're involved in 7 or 8 clubs and projects, And that doesn't include your work for admission. That doesn't include your double majors and your double minor. That doesn't, like, all of your other things, that doesn't include that. So talk a little bit about like time management and how like all of this is possible, because like this doesn't sound even possible. So just talk a little bit about time management and how you manage it all.
One thing that's very helpful is all my calendars. I have Outlook, Google, Paper, any type of calendar. I have it. They're huge. I like to put everything down whenever I'm in a meeting or a club meeting of sorts, anything like that. If there's a date mentioned that I'm a part of, it goes straight into my calendar. So always having those secured and locked down. I'm not the best at it all the time, but it's a work in progress. But one thing that I love that I actually found on Instagram Reels, because I'm not on TikTok, is this: you take a piece of paper or like a notebook and you cut it in half and you do one of, like, one side will be the assignments and things that need to get done. Like, these have hard deadlines. Like for, any SMSU student, it'll probably be a discussion post and a response, a quiz due on Sunday at 11:59, all those things that need to get done. But then on the other side, you do your big ones. Like, if I'm doing something for Senate, I'll write that down and like, okay, this will get done, but that's later. Focus on the things, especially that need to get done today, tomorrow, throughout the week kind of deal. So you kind of break it up a little bit. Makes your list a lot shorter when you're looking at the present, like what do I need to get done is huge. But one thing I've been really working on is putting in time for myself. So throughout the week, I'll have block sections. Right now, it's just an hour a week or so, increasing that slowly of just like, this is my time, no work, no emails. I'll spend it, eating food, drinking probably like my fourth cup of coffee, depending on whatever it may be, and just kind of focusing on myself and decompressing.
So I think by this time, even the audience, even myself, we are kind of getting overwhelmed for you, and we are like, Sam, why, bro? Like, why do you go through all of this? I mean, you're doing all of this. One day you can just wake up and decide, I'm done. I don't want to do this. I can just quit. Like, why do you keep on going? Why do you keep on doing the things you want to do? Has it changed over time? What's your motivation? What's your purpose?
For the most part, I don't think it's really changed over time. I feel like I've always been kind of like this, probably and lack of better words, worse off now. Like, I've done a lot more now than I did, say, in high school. But what really motivates me is just, there's a lot of people out there that say something needs to change, something needs to happen, and they don't do anything about it. And it's in my mind that if I want to see something change, if I don't like it, I can complain about it, but what's going to happen? So I'd rather be the one to take the step up and at least start something to hopefully fix it. And I'm also just someone that really can't sit still. Like, I've tried, especially towards the end of each semester when clubs are dying down and there's no more homework assignments. Oh, it's not fun. I just sit there at home waiting for next assignment, thinking I have something that needs to be done. I'm like, no, I actually get to sit down and relax. And I don't like that. So just kind of wanting to be the change and always having to be busy is kind of how I function. But also just being the person that can help somebody is also huge. Like, if I want to be helped, I know there was someone there, so I want to kind of return the favor. And one thing that my parents have always kind of ingrained in my mind and how I was raised is like, help others when you can and leave the world a better place than what you found it. And if I can do that, say, starting small here at SMSU, then I know I can continue to grow and see if it's in a city, a state, the country, whoever knows. But that's just kind of what is motivating me to keep going.
To kind of finish it out, to kind of end the story a little bit, which story's not over, but kind of going, looking at the next step. Do you have any big plans for post-graduation?
Oh, gosh. I'm trying to figure that out right now. My main plan, hopefully, is I do plan on taking a gap year after I graduate just to kind of recuperate a little bit financially and maybe just take a break, try that out for a chance. But also, I do want to go to law school. So that's kind of my next big step for schooling itself. So I'll be studying for the LSAT, kind of looking into where I want to go, where I want to end up with that. If I want to stay in Minnesota, do I leave the state and come back kind of deal? Kind of figure that out and hopefully throw in some like internships under my belt to at least get me connected to the possible field I'm going to be in, or just something that will help me get into law school, would say. But that's kind of like where I'm at, just more schooling. Surprise, surprise. But yeah.
Okay. So I have one question from my end that I'm curious to hear from you. So I'm also part of Inactors, and I see pictures of you like when you initially started and what you have become now. But one thing I don't see is how has your mentality changed since the time you came to SMSU to where you are now? How has your mindset kind of changed and grown?
Um, I would say one thing about my mindset is just kind of listen more. Like that's one thing that's really huge. I do like to talk sometimes, and when, especially when I'm passionate about something, I will talk your ear off if you really let me. But one thing about it is just kind of listening to the people I work with, the people that are technically under me because I have a title, stuff like that, and like how it works and like what they're feeling to take that into account on how to proceed. But also like I would say I was a little bit more timid back then in high school and stuff. So kind of when I hear no or like, we can't really do it this way or it's always been done this way, it's kind of a more of a challenge. Sometimes like, I feel like that's not true and I'll figure out how to do it or kind of follow the rules, but do it the way I want to do it. But also one of the biggest things is kind of like how to deal with people. That is huge. I would say I was a little combative back then too, kind of back and forth between being timid and combative. But it really has given me the mindset of like, be the bigger person. There's going to be people that are going to make you mad, not just at school, not just in clubs, but the world. So if you kind of learn that now of like, you can work with these people, be respectful, it'll make it so much easier. There's a time and place for everything, kind of pick your battle kind of deal. So that's been huge and that's helped me a lot because not everyone's going to act the same. So you have to be prepared to work with the easiest person, the best hardworking people, or even sometimes the ones that are super stubborn and won't give you an inch because they know if they do, they'll give you a mile kind of deal.
I heard this from a good friend named Matt Tanksley. He always said this one thing and it stuck with me. He's like, you're not as good as you think you are, but you're also not as bad as you think you are. And I was like, man, like, 'cause you really sometimes you think like you're hot and you got it. If something comes along and humbles you, and at the same time, it's like if things are going rough, like just know that that's not going to be like that forever. Like you just got to kind of withstand the wave.